Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see some folks who are joining us for the first time and some returning folks. So we're really happy to spend this afternoon with you, and especially grateful for Dr. Kathleen Nadeau joining us with this conversation today. We spend some time talking about treating ADHD during this pandemic and some of the special components around working with folks with ADHD in the midst of this pandemic. So just as some housekeeping to get us started, we will have a slides presentation for the first half of the hour. So 35 minutes, we'll go through the material, and we'll invite all of you to submit questions through the chat box during the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, we will open it up for conversations and Q&A. But to introduce our speakers for today, obviously you all have met Tracy Ashworth, who's our Director of Outreach and Business Development here at the dorm. We're also joined by John McGeehan, the founder of the dorm and CEO. And Dr. Amanda Fialk is our Chief of Clinical Services with the dorm. So she'll be presenting along with Dr. Nadeau. And Dr. Nadeau is the founder of the Chesapeake Center with several locations in Maryland, specializing in the treatment of ADD and other related disorders. ADHD, excuse me. So I'm going to pass things over to to Amanda, who's going to get us started, and ask Meredith to go ahead and bring up the slides.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today and participating in this conversation about treating ADHD amidst a global pandemic. I think treating anything amidst a global pandemic is challenging, but there certainly are unique challenges and vulnerabilities that our clients who are diagnosed with ADHD face during these really challenging and unprecedented times. So when we sort of, back in March, which seems like it was both just yesterday and forever ago at the same time, when we knew that the world was going to sort of change and move more into a virtual landscape, at the dorm, we really started thinking about our clients and which clients were going to be particularly vulnerable during this time. And when thinking about our clients who struggle with learning differences or with ADHD, we thought about how intensely some of their struggles might be amplified during this time. What we know of our clients who struggle with ADHD is that routine and structure and certainty and stability are all things that help mitigate symptoms of ADHD and also help individuals who struggle with this diagnosis to cope with anxiety and stress, which exacerbate symptoms of ADHD. And this sort of disruptive experience during coronavirus has made it really, really hard to create routine, structure, stability, and certainly certainty. I think that right now, there really is no certainty in terms of how the world is going to look in a week from now, a month from now, or 6 months from now. And there is a general intolerance for uncertainty, which in turn increases stress and anxiety. Those with ADHD also struggle to manage daily regular acts of living, or ADLs. And again, the stress and uncertainty of the time can make these sort of regular activities of daily living feel almost insurmountable, especially as schedules are disrupted. Research indicates that children and adults with ADHD are likely to have co-occurring disorders, which further exacerbate their symptoms and challenges. In a 2007 national survey, it was shown that 33% of children with ADHD also had at least one coexisting disorder, and 16% had two. In a 2006 research study on adults diagnosed with ADHD, 38.3% of the study participants were shown to also have a coexisting mood disorder like depression. So right now, coronavirus is not only impacting the symptoms of ADHD, coronavirus is also, as we know, impacting one's symptoms if they struggle with things like depression, anxiety, trauma, substance use, eating disorder, you name it. I don't think that there is a diagnosis that has not been impacted by what is going on in the external world right now. The virtual learning dilemma, and this continues, and I think this will continue for quite some time. Individuals who are diagnosed with ADHD often need more support around learning and executive function. 45% of children with ADHD also have a learning disability. So for this population, the move, and the abrupt move in most cases, to online learning has not been smooth, and more often than not has not accommodated young people with ADHD. And common issues that we're seeing are things like there is less routine and structure in an online learning environment. Some classes take place online in real time. Some classes are sort of left to your own devices. Here are the assignments, here's the work, you can do it on your own time. More distractions outside of the classroom environment. You know, we coach young people with ADHD of how to navigate a classroom environment by doing things like sitting at the front of the classroom, or having a note taker, or special pens, other accommodations. There is no more classroom. Their classroom is now often the home environment. Sometimes it's the kitchen table where mom and dad are also working from virtually, and baby brother or sister and dog are running around and doing their things. This is difficult even for individuals who don't struggle with learning issues or with ADHD. So navigating this distracting environment outside of the classroom has been particularly challenging during this time. There's also less accountability around self-regulation skills and other coping skills that have been being practiced up to this point. A lot of students obtain a tremendous amount of support either on college campuses or in their high schools for their learning challenges or their ADHD. And without this sort of face-to-face support or coaching, there is less accountability and there is less practicing of skills that may have worked in the past. And again, this segues into the lack of supplemental supports. Whether it's therapeutic support in a therapeutic environment, like the dorm or Chesapeake, or it's support on a college campus through a disability office or a health center, these support systems, if they do exist, they don't exist in the way that the student is used to them existing. It's not that face-to-face support. It's once again virtual support. So just like learning educational information can be difficult in a virtual landscape, so too can processing of coaching skills that you might be working on with a therapist or a coach when you're doing it virtually versus face-to-face. So what we're seeing at the dorm during this time is really a multitude of things. We're seeing exacerbated symptoms, especially stress and anxiety, disorganization, and compromised executive function. We're seeing challenges with schoolwork and academic performance, A, with sitting down and doing the work, and then B, with completing the work. A lot more avoidance behavior, I think just because the landscape is so overwhelming that it's easier to just sort of avoid it altogether. Difficulty adjusting to a virtual academic landscape. I think that this is exacerbated by the fact that the adjustment did happen abruptly and seemingly overnight. For some of our college students, they were in classes one day and the next day they were back home. And it happened overnight, seemingly out of nowhere. Unique challenges with Zoom and online platforms and schedule management. Again, this speaks to the fact that, some classes are taking place online during regularly scheduled times, others are not. And for somebody who struggles with organization and time management, to be told, here's your class, you can do it as you please in the time that you want, in the time frame that you want is almost a setup for failure. So it's really, helping these students to create their own schedules when there is not a structure in place. Accessing the academic support and accommodations in a virtual landscape has also been challenging. Things like going to the Student Service Center and picking up your notes that your note taker took. Even, not having set places to go to for help with essay writing or paper completion. All these accommodations were created in an in-person environment. So transitioning them and making them just as useful in a virtual landscape, I think, has been a task that many institutions, educational institutions, have not yet mastered yet. This is the first time they've really been faced with it. What we're also seeing is a lot of family discord. So for us, we work primarily with college students. They were on college campuses. They were trying to navigate college campuses with this diagnosis. They had set up certain structures and accommodations and safeguards in order to be able to manage. And now they're back home with their parents. And being back home and having your parents looking over your shoulder and asking, are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Did you write that paper? Why didn't you write this paper yet? Did you wake up yet? Did you eat breakfast? Why are you staying up so late? Is creating a lot of stress and tension in the family system, which is in turn only exacerbating some of the symptoms that somebody who struggles with ADHD is facing. On the positive side, and I think it's always important to look at the positive, we are seeing opportunities for resilience and adaptability. And I think a lot of our clients have a tremendous amount of strengths, and they're certainly not defined by their diagnosis. And this is a time where we as professionals and as providers can really help them to tap into those strengths, and also help the family to tap into their strengths as a system in being a supportive environment for the young adult child who is now home for the first time in quite some time. So what we're doing to support our clients is, first, what we set up was a twice a day check-in protocol. So every day, our clients get a check-in first thing in the morning from their licensed coach, who is a clinician, and an end of day check-in. These check-ins are taking place in person for our clients who are in New York City or DC, or virtually. And the purpose of this is really to bookend the day, to help in the morning to set intentions for the day, to review what the schedule will be for the day, and then at the end of the day, to really take stock of the day. What worked? What maybe didn't work so well but can work better tomorrow? What adjustments need to be made to the schedule? And then just accountability around sleep hygiene, because what we know is when there is less structure, that sleep hygiene can definitely fall to the wayside, and without proper sleep, that also leads to an exacerbation of symptoms. We have dedicated academic coaching and support available both in person and virtually. This can take place individually, or it can take place through a study hall, which is a group setting. A lot of our clients need both. They like having the individual one-on-one coaching, but they also like having the support of being in a study hall, whether that's virtual or socially distant study hall in person, to have other people their age who are struggling in a similar way to sit down and to study with. And of course, there is a coach there helping the client stay focused in incremental times, but then giving breaks so that they can all walk around and do things together. We have executive function coaching and an increase in parent coaching. As I said, with the increase in parent discord or family discord comes a need for more parent coaching. In non-coronavirus world times, we typically did once a week parent coaching. We're finding that our parents in the past 3-4 months have required coaching more like 2-3 times a week, mostly to hold them accountable to not overstepping boundaries, to not turning into their child's alarm clock, to not doing their child's laundry. to not cooking all their child's meals, to not writing their papers for them or doing their schoolwork for them. So we really don't want them to fall into those old traps, because their young adult children have made a lot of progress, and we want to maintain those gains even during these challenging times. We've also had an increased opportunities for social interactions. We found that when our clients are having fun and laughing and socializing, they feel better about themselves. And when you feel better about yourselves, you tend to perform better in various different aspects of your life, including academically. We've increased our health and wellness programming. Being online and sitting at a computer all day in Zooms, hour after hour after hour, is exhausting. Mentally, it's exhausting emotionally, it's exhausting physically. And if there are not very purposeful breaks scheduled in throughout the day, performance actually decreases. So we've made it a point to make modifications to our therapeutic schedule so that at least 2 or 3 times a day, there are opportunities for our clients to do virtual yoga, virtual exercise, virtual mindfulness or meditation groups to help recenter, reground, take a deep breath, and then go on to the next task. We've really tried, and I think we've done a pretty good job of maintaining a really consistent therapeutic schedule with our clients. Consistency is key. The things that they were doing pre-coronavirus, we still want them doing during coronavirus. Some of those things might be taking place virtually, but that doesn't mean that you don't do them. Having a structured, consistent schedule creates a sense of safety for some of our clients who might feel unsafe as a result of some of their symptoms. And knowing what each day is going to bring and having that clarity of scheduling can help the mind to organize itself better and to process the world in a way that feels a little bit less overwhelming. We've opened up a lot of opportunities for volunteering. We think that when you do good things for others, you feel good about yourself, and that self-esteem is something that a lot of our clients who struggle with ADHD struggle with, low self-esteem. They've been less than, not good enough for a long time in their life, and we want to give them opportunities to feel good about themselves, and helping others is one of those opportunities. And then filling up weekends with activities and having community meetings. Community is a source of support, and community is a source of strength, and being around other young people who struggle with similar things as you do is makes you feel a lot less lonely, and it can be certainly very empowering. And then this slide just shows a sample schedule. So as you can see, for some of our clients who are in treatment in a more intensive manner, their day is pretty scheduled from first thing in the morning until they go to bed at night. And I think that, again, this structure and this accountability makes the world feel a little bit less overwhelming right now. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Nadeau to talk about what's going on at Chesapeake, and then also some tips. You are on mute.
Good, okay. I'm very impressed by what I'm hearing is going on at the dorm. I mean, you really are sort of putting the scaffolding around students that ceases to exist during these crazy times we're living in. And, you know, I have told students for years that I absolutely don't recommend online courses. I mean, a lot of students with ADHD will want to come home in the summer and take a class online, and it's almost always disastrous. There's no there, and there's no accountability, there's no schedule, and often it's a fail for students. And I think that the structure that you're putting around them is absolutely terrific. And a lot of what we're talking to students and their families about is looking for other ways, and probably less effective ways, because it's dependent on the student and their family, to create that structure and support while they're at home. So the one thing that I would say is different when the students that we're working with, your day starts with sort of an accountability check-in at 8:30 in the morning. I'm finding that during these times of COVID, that young adults are taking full advantage of being able to live within their natural circadian rhythm, which is to stay up until 3 in the morning and sleep until 11. And one of the things that I tell them is, you can actually do that. You can do that while you're at home and maybe actually get a decent night's sleep in the process. And there's no reason in the world why you can't structure your day so that it starts late in the morning and goes on into the evening. So in an odd way, that's an advantage of COVID. They can, I'm telling them they're all going to grow 3 inches during COVID probably, because many of them are just eating and sleeping in between their time online. There certainly is an increase in frustration and family conflict, and we've dealt with some very concerning family situations with mom and dad both working from home in demanding jobs. And we're here in the Washington, D.C. area, which is famous for high-level dual career couples. And so they're in these very important meetings, and then there are kids at home that may be getting into arguments, maybe making big noises outside of the room in which mom and dad are trying to work. Maybe everybody getting online at the same time, and suddenly the internet is going out when dad's in a very important meeting. So a lot of what we're dealing with is the pragmatics. I mean, at this moment, it's just my husband and myself working from home, but we have certainly had to increase our bandwidth to not run into problems. And, so there are just some pragmatics of trying to figure out how to comfortably all live at home at the same time. I'm hearing a lot of students actually say, I'm having an easier time studying after everybody else has gone to bed, or most everybody else has gone to bed. There's actually one family that I'm working with that have 3 college-age sons. And so I'm talking to dad about how's it going. And he said, it's going amazingly well, but remarkably, we never see them except when they raid the refrigerator. Each of the boys is living in their own bedroom in front of their own computer and doing their own thing, and are sort of managing to muddle their way through their college courses. One of the other advantages that I find, and I really do want to focus on the positive here, is that it's possible to record lectures if they're online. And I have amazingly run into situations when people were at school. I've worked with kids in engineering schools, for example, where they would not allow the student to record the lecture. Why? Because hilariously, I think they were afraid that nobody would come to class if there was a recorded lecture running around campus. But now they can record the lecture. And I've worked with students who struggled with in-person live lectures because many students with ADHD aren't good at listening and taking cogent notes at the same time. Not everybody has a good note taker. But if you've got a recorded lecture, you can stop it, you can back up, you can write your notes. And I find that that's a real study advantage, taking courses online at home. Tons of disappointment. I just talked to a young man today who graduated from high school and will be entering college in 3 weeks. And he talked about how different it was that they sat in this little private school sat in an immense auditorium. So there wasn't that feeling of we're all here with our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles celebrating. It was just a few forlorn students going up to the podium to collect their piece of paper. But I've seen some remarkably creative ways to celebrate. In fact, my son lives in a little tiny town in Colorado, and he sent me this wonderful picture of a male and female high school graduate, you know, with their mortarboards on, their robes on, standing up in the back of a pickup truck and being driven slowly through the town while everybody was clapping and cheering. That was their graduation celebration, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And I think in some ways, the virtual world is the world that so many of our college students have always been living in. I mean, they're living in a virtual world so often, even when they're on campus. So I think it's the older generations that may be having a harder time making the shift. In fact, I had my granddaughters over, socially distanced. We don't even let them in the part of the house that we live in, very careful. But my husband was saying, should I go turn on the television for them in the part of the house we don't live in? And they just kind of snickered, like, you know, no, Grandpa, we're on our iPads. We don't watch television. They live on their iPads and carry them with them everywhere. So I think that in many ways they're making the shift pretty easily. And I would even say that I'm so struck now that socializing, especially among high school students, even though they're with each other, were in the before days, as I now say, they were with each other on campus. Most of the socializing took place online, through social media, through texting. And it was carefully explained to me that we don't make phone calls anymore. I would never call a friend, I text them. So I think the transition has been a lot easier for some students than others. So what are we doing at Chesapeake? Well, we're doing lots of groups, and I'm finding it interesting that in the before days, when people were going places and doing things during the summer, our groups would tend to end as the academic year ended. And every single group we've been running for adolescents and young adults, the group members asked that we continue the groups over the summer, that they're clearly getting a lot out of feeling connected, and they've known each other through the group process, and it used to be in person, of course, and they want to continue that. So we're doing that. And we're doing lots of support groups in addition to our therapy groups. The other thing that we started doing very experimentally and creatively is what we're calling outdoor therapy. In fact, we're writing an article about outdoor therapy. And we have done outdoor therapy on inline skates. We've done outdoor therapy on bicycles, in parks. We've got a 40-something who's living alone in DC, very lonely, and he meets his therapist in Rock Creek Park, sitting on 2 benches 6 feet apart, and he's really enjoying that connection and very much needs it. I'm particularly concerned about people that are living alone, and I think the positive thing for college students is almost none of them are living alone. Pretty much everyone has come home to stay with their family during the pandemic, so we don't have that disconnectedness that we see elsewhere. In terms of creating structure, again, my hat's off to you. I think the dorm is doing a fantastic job of creating structure. And we talked to our students about making the environment that they're studying in as close to their standard study environment as possible. For some students, they're able to study in their bedrooms. They have a desk there. and the bed isn't calling them. For other students, it's clear that they're going to be on the bed, and then they're going to be on YouTube, and then they're going to be falling asleep if they're 6 feet away from their bed. And so we have to arrange for them to be studying in a different part of the house. But I think, again, looking at the upside, there is a lot that you can do when you're studying from home that you cannot do. You don't have control over when your classes are taking place. And, you know, some classes are in real time and you don't have control, but a lot of them are not in real time. And so we're really talking to people about taking brain breaks. There's a lot of research that it's very, very restorative and reduces ADHD symptoms to go outside. Well, you can't just wander outside if you're, you know, in a class or in a lab or on campus, but we can do that at home. So brain breaks to exercise. I think your yoga class is fantastic, but I really encourage brain breaks as frequently as possible. There's a reason that TED Talks are 17 minutes long. And I think most college lectures are way, way too long for good concentration. If you're looking at a recorded lecture, you can pause it, you can get up, move around, get something to drink, go outside for a minute, come back and restart it. So in some ways it can be a lot more brain friendly. One of the things that I wanted to talk about that was just on the last slide is that whether students are in person or not, we are teaching them brain-friendly daily habits. There's really some fascinating body of research that's growing now that shows that we can reduce ADHD symptoms. In fact, we can reduce mild cognitive impairment by paying great attention to our daily health habits. And that includes getting enough sleep. That includes eating a healthy, low glycemic diet. Easier said than done, especially among the college crowd, but I think that students at home are probably exposed to a healthier diet than they are on campus. Getting daily aerobic exercise, which our brains start creating BDNF, and BDNF is a hormone that literally puts our brains in the optimal position for learning. So there is a lot we can do through our daily habits at home to put our students in a position to learn more effectively. At Chesapeake, we have worked long and hard. We're offering virtual testing, which is really very rarely available. We're getting people from outside of the country coming to us for testing because my amazing neuropsychology team has figured out the technology to do it. It is working, it's complicated. We're using multiple cameras, you know, iPads, smartphones, so that we can actually see what the person is doing as they're doing manipulatives. We're interacting with them online. And I think we have figured out an excellent way to do good, solid online assessments. We're also doing a lot of Facebook Live events, very similar to this event, which can be, they're recorded, they can be replayed, offering a lot of good practical information for the public, and we're doing those online all the time. And international reach, I think that that's something you're probably experiencing as well now that you're working remotely with people at the dorm. And that is, I was just on the phone this morning with somebody from Singapore who is asking for online training for their staff in Singapore, online testing for their students in Singapore. It's amazing how our reach has broadened in this virtual environment. So what do we tell our clients? Don't overwhelm yourself. That's my message to the parents, and that's my message to the students. This is hard for all of us, and I think we need to adjust our expectations accordingly. Try the 2-minute rule. That's my rule for if you can't get started doing something, tell yourself, I'm going to do it for 2 minutes. And if I still can't stand doing it, I'll take a break and come back later. Because what I find is once we're in a task, we are able to keep doing it. It's when we're looking up all the way to the top of the mountain that we can't take that first step on the climb. I don't have to talk anymore about creating a daily schedule. I think you covered that beautifully in terms of what the dorm is doing. And I think it's also just so important not to just focus on what we ought to be doing, but to focus on what we can be doing. I've worked with students that have done incredibly creative things musically online. The technology is there so that you can actually perform together, even though each student is in their own home. And I've seen some wonderful performances with students that are doing that. So, learning bursts. This just gets back to what I was saying earlier, that we can't realistically sit down and study for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time. And if you schedule your time, you're going to be much more efficient and effective in learning in brief bursts when you can actually focus. Moving from one activity to another, I worked with a student who actually set this system up himself, so that he, in his bedroom, he read on his bed. When he started feeling sleepy, he would get up and work at his computer. And when he got tired of that, he had a chair where he practiced the guitar. And he would rotate among those 3 stations that he had created and got an amazing amount done by mixing it up. Another suggestion, and this came from a mother that we're working with that is homeschooling her children all of a sudden, but I think it works for college students and for us adults too. And she said that she divided the morning and the afternoon up into a learning activity, a physical activity, and a creative activity. Then lunch, and then the same thing. And she said she found her kids were really engaged and enjoying that because they weren't trying to chain themselves to the desk and work for much longer periods than they were able to. So, consider making yourself a standing desk. Our CEO at Chesapeake, when we were in person, created a standing desk. She thought she was going to need 2 desks. Turns out she never left her standing desk, and that it really helped her stay more engaged and energized. My son, who's a software developer, uses a standing desk. He works virtually all day long, and it really helps keep him engaged. And I think that it's really important to create a good office space, a good study space. Don't just sit down at some random spot that's cluttered with other objects. Go to the trouble to make a space in which you can focus. And a lot of research has been done on the fact that we're much more efficient and productive when we are in a decluttered space that helps us focus on the task at hand. So, of course, communication is very important. I like all the supports that you're doing at the dorm, and I try to help students sort of create that for themselves when they're at home. I have coached students, especially more extroverted students, to create what I call study pods, where when you're working on homework, connect with a couple of other students that are in your same class, go online together, then they become your accountability buddies at the same time. And you've committed to that study time, and you're able to talk to each other if you get stuck or don't understand something. So that connectivity and interaction and the accountability sort of mimics some of the wonderful things you're doing at the dorm. We've already talked about a lot of things on this take care of yourself, but it is so important. We can focus and function and learn much better when we're rested, when we've had good exercise, when we're not living on junk food, and when we're not staying up 2/3 of the night binging on Netflix or YouTube. So I think just finding that balance is so incredibly important.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nadeau and Dr. Fialk. Amanda, this has been a really rich discussion of so many really practical tips and things to consider, and really about translating the skills that we're helping our young people learn pre-pandemic, and thinking about what they can do to translate and set themselves up for success in the midst of this pandemic, I think is so important. And I keep talking to people about how we're all learning skills right now that we didn't maybe ask to learn or want to learn, but here we are learning. And I think we're all going to be able to carry on with so many of these skills, even when things return to a level of normal that we're more used to pre-pandemic, although I think things will be also changed for a long time. So on that note, I'd love to be able to have an opportunity to hear from folks in the audience, questions or commentary or curiosities that you have for Dr. Nadeau and Dr. Fialk about things that are happening at the dorm or at Chesapeake Center, or things that you all are doing it's a nice opportunity to share some wisdom with folks too. Feel free to add something into the chat, or you can turn off or turn on your microphone and share. One thing that I think I'm curious about is, we've seen a lot of the schools, universities in particular, but I think also K through 12 are just trying to figure out still what is the appropriate plan for the fall. And I know here in Washington, D.C., we've had lots of schools who hoped to be able to be back in person in some way, say like, oof, now that the pandemic is continuing, it's not safe to have everybody come back in August. So the plan is changing once again. So I guess I'm curious about, Amanda, if there's anything that you wanted to share about kind of helping people continue to navigate that level of change. And then we'll look at some questions that are coming in the chat box.
Yeah, sorry, I was just paying attention I was just looking at some of the questions that came in the chat box. But in terms of, I think for our families and our clients, and Dr. Nadeau, I'm curious to see what you're seeing too, is that what's so difficult right now is that there is no plan yet. So we don't know if schools are opening, and we don't know if they're opening, what it's going to look like if they do open. So there's no, it's August at this point in time for all intents and purposes, effective, the end of the week, and school is a month away, and nobody knows what that landscape is going to look like. And for a child who has special learning needs, whether that's ADHD or a learning disorder, planning is of paramount importance. And how can you plan when you don't know what you're planning for? So it's anxiety management at this point in time, and helping our families in particular, our parents in particular, to be able to take a step back, take a deep breath, and just be in a place of acceptance that nobody knows right now. And we have to accept that. But that's been really difficult. And I think it's difficult for us as providers too, because it's a very powerless feeling.
I couldn't agree more. And what I tell all the families that we're working with is the simplest thing is to plan for continued distance learning. I mean, the kids don't need to be taught how to go to school. I mean, they've done that for years. So if tomorrow it's announced everybody's back in class, they know how to do that. I think it's frustrating if they're holding their breath, wanting to go back to class. And I think it's easier to just say this for the time being is the new normal. And who knows what's going to happen? We may be in a back and forth situation of going to class and then not going to class. So let's just focus on getting good at distance learning. And I think we have learned a lot. I have a feeling that the distance learning that will take place starting in the fall will be of a higher quality, that a lot of teachers have spent a lot of time learning how to keep their kids, their students engaged in a way that they didn't know when suddenly the switch was flipped in March.
I really agree with that. I think we have to be careful not to compare the emergency planning from the spring in the middle of the semester to, expect that same experience in the fall. So I think that's a really important point. I'll just look at some of the questions in the chat. Erin was saying that she tried to help her son with taking those little bits and breaking up a project into workable pieces, but his preference is really just to sit down and knock it out. And so any kind of ideas about how to help people if they're resistant, or young people if they're resistant to breaking down into chunks, or other strategies when their first instinct is to just sit down and work the whole project through?
Sure. What I would say is go for it. Sit down and knock it out. But if you get stuck, then a way to get unstuck is to just pick the next chunk. What they can't do is sit down and knock it out the night before. So I would say if you want to knock it out this afternoon, more power to you. That really the chunking is a strategy for those who can't sit down and knock it out. And we don't have to argue with our kids beforehand that, no, that won't work.
There was also a question that came in. Lisa asked, what about new college graduates with few job prospects now due to COVID and the economy, and who cannot even get motivated to look for jobs, and perhaps with good reason? ADHD means that transitions are difficult for our young adult son. We see a lot of young adults in this exact position right now, and what we're really trying to do is reframe the thinking a little bit. And this could be either for a young adult who has just graduated from college and now the jobs prospects are not so great. And it could also be applicable to a young adult who has graduated from high school and their college that they were going to is going to be completely virtual, and they're opting to take a year off before they start school because they want to start school in an in-person, more quote unquote normal manner. I think that we can look at this as if we reframe the thinking and look at this year, potentially, because I think we're in this for another year, as an opportunity to grow in different ways that we might not have had the opportunity to do had we just jumped right into college or right into a job. And no, the opportunity is not going to be touring the world and visiting, Europe, because nobody's traveling right now. But there are other ways to pursue personal developmental opportunities during this time that you would not have otherwise been able to do. Whether that's emotional development, mental development, spiritual development. There are different things that we can be doing to better ourselves during this time when we're taking a little bit of a break from the normal trajectory of life. And I think that many countries actually, their kids don't go straight from high school to college. Taking that year in between or a year after before entering a job world is considered a normal trajectory because it offers an opportunity that you might not get at any other point in your life to take a year of self-exploration. So it might mean that we need to get more creative with our young people and how to structure this year so that it maximizes self-exploration because we don't have the normal access to certain things that we would have. But it still is possible to take advantage of this more quiet time. The world is a lot quieter in some ways right now. And with that quietness is an opportunity for self-reflection and growth.
Thank you for that. There's also a question from Anna, Dr. Nadeau, if you could speak a little bit more specifically about how you are doing your assessments virtually or online, in particular the cognitive assessments.
Sure. We are doing them online as close to the same as we would do them in person as possible. And we've developed a pretty elaborate system in order to do that. What we are doing, first of all, the publishers of the tests have given everyone access to digital copies of the test, so we don't have to use paper copies. We also send a packet to the testee that has paper copies of any forms that they need to have paper copies of, for example, things that they're going to be writing on. We send them a tripod on which can be mounted an iPad or a smartphone. We do a lot of coaching with the adult if it's an adult assessment, or with the parent if it's a child or teenager, to show them how to position that phone so that we can see the keyboard, we can see what they're writing if they're writing or drawing something. We're interacting with them. The other thing we do is we do the testing in much shorter bites because it's a lot harder to stay focused. Like typically someone would come into our office and we would test them for 3 hours. Depending on the age and the temperament of the person being tested, our testing sessions might be only 1 hour, and yet we might talk with them over the course of 5 different testing sessions. So we've got an amazing team that has put it together, and the only thing that we've come across that can't be done reasonably online is the ADOS, and the ADOS is, of course, for assessing autism spectrum. And that's because that's a very interactive and observational test. And so we are going to be offering the ADOS in person with all kinds of safety constraints in a very large room with huge medical quality air filters with UV lights that are constantly circulating the air and killing all the bacteria, virus, etc. We have clear view masks so we can see each other's faces so that we can interact. And we're putting 2 people in a very large room, and those 2 people are the only ones in the suite at the same time. So we've really had to go to pretty intense measures, but we're able to because we can do the rest of the testing in an online environment.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity that I think we've all been forced to call up in our brain has been really amazing. I've been so impressed with the way you're describing things, so many other programs and folks trying to get the help that the clients need, because what we know is that we can't just wait this out. You know, I think there was some wishful thinking that was happening, and I know myself too. I thought, okay, you know what, let's give this 6 weeks or something at the beginning of the pandemic, and then here we are several months later and knowing that it's going to be with us for some time. So we can't hold our breath. We can't wait this out. So to be able to find ways to meet the needs of the clients and the families that we work with right now is just crucial. So I really appreciate the creativity and the problem solving around testing and meeting the needs of all of our clients. So on that note, I will close us up so that we have a few minutes for a little brain break ourselves so that we can disconnect for our computers for a few minutes before our next meetings. But just to confirm what some folks are asking for in the chat, we absolutely will send out the slides, a copy of the slides. We're also recording this webinar, which I should have mentioned at the beginning, and I apologize that I didn't, but we put it on our YouTube channel at the dorm. So you're welcome to go back, and exactly what Dr. Nadeau was saying, if you missed a part, to be able to go back and follow up with some of those skills or suggestions that we were talking about throughout. We're so grateful that you all were here. We're so grateful to the Chesapeake Center and Kathleen and Julianne. We really appreciate your partnership over the last couple of weeks, and it's been really fun. This is one of the silver linings of this pandemic is it's forced us to get more creative about how we partner with our colleagues, and so that's been wonderful for us. On that note, next week we will be here. Oh, sorry, Tracy, did you want to say something?
Oh no, you're heading there. Just wanted to make sure.
Next
Sorry,
week,
Sarah.
that's okay. No, you're all good. We're excited about next week. We have a roundtable discussion every Thursday at 3:00. So next week we will be joined by Vaughn Gilmore, who's the Director of Addiction Services at Miniger. And we're going to be talking about how to build resilience in the midst of this pandemic. So we're really looking forward to that conversation because that is something we all need. So on that note, thank you all so much for your time and attention this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you in another roundtable soon.
Thanks, everybody.